Welcome back to the Innovative Agency, everyone. Sharon Torek here with you today. And it's been a while since we have had a guest on the show to talk about the people issues in your business. No matter what the economy does, no matter what technology is breathing down our necks, whether it's AI or something else, we all need good people to run our businesses and get our clients' goals met. And it's always a struggle with agencies. It has been ever been since I've been introduced. I've been representing them. It doesn't get easier when the economy gets worse.
Mhm.
And what is true though is that I notice a much more all over the place, if I can use that phrase, or diverse sort of spectrum of attitudes around building teams, particularly in these days of a distributed model of working. And so, here to talk to us about it today, I am so excited. We have Superman on the show. Atiba, welcome. I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Sharon,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. I was going to say thank you.
Oh, it's definitely my pleasure. And so you founded a video marketing agency. You're a multi hyphenate, you're a speaker, you are a content expert, an SEO expert, lots of things. But um, one of the things that you've developed a strong point of view around is talent,
Mhm.
building your teams. And we're going to get to the point about how our work models in a minute. But first of all, as you and I were getting acquainted before we started recording this show, you had a hat wear switch. And so I want you to tell the story about the hat. And for those of you who aren't, seeing this on video, which is all of you just about, Atiba's wearing the second of his Superman hats just since we got on the call today. One was a baseball cap. Now he's got a visor. Oh, another baseball cap. He's got them in all colors, and they all have the famous Superman logo on them. And I asked him about them, just having social conversation. And it's a really interesting story that just happens to be super relevant to what we're going to talk about. So tell the story.
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. They call me the video content Superman because of the hats and what I do in video and so on and so forth. But that's the brand that got built, but that's not where it started, and it was a complete accident.
Mhm.
So for 15 years of my life, I coached high level football, and just over a decade or so ago, I took over a high school team.
Mhm.
And I'm going to my first practice for this new team. It's the middle of August. It's blazing sun. I'm driving and I realize I left my hat at home.
Oh no.
Now, these are two-a-day practices. We're outside all day. Okay. You
Mhm.
cannot be outside that long without something on your head. And
Right.
so I
Exactly.
pull, right. So I pull into the local Walmart and I know I need a bucket hat. And they had two choices. They had the standard old fishing bucket hat that had the mesh top. I'm like, that doesn't work. The sun just beaming right on, right? And then they had a Superman bucket hat. And I said, well, Superman it is. And I put that thing on and I went to practice and I ended up wearing it that entire football season. And throughout that season, some of the players and coaches actually started buying me Superman hats. And that's where it all started. At this point, I've got over 200 Superman hats.
Really?
A little bit
200.
ridiculous, well over 200, to be honest with you.
Wow.
And all different shapes, sizes, and colors that you can imagine. But honestly, the brand isn't about me. People ask me all the time, okay, so you must love Superman or you think you're Superman. A lot of people think I'm narcissistic because I wear the hats, that I'm the superhero.
Mhm.
But here's the reality, and this is the thing too, when as we talk about building team and we talk about having team, right? Here's the thing. I wear the S on my head, and when I do, I can't see it. You can.
Mhm.
And I wear the S on my head because it's my signal to you that my job is to help bring out the superhero, the superpowers that exist inside of you.
Wow, that's powerful. And in the athletes who you coach, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, coached for a long time and have lots of athletes in lots of different places, in all the way out to professional football at this point. And it was really a great experience. And honestly, as we talk about building teams,
All right.
let me start by saying I used to suck at being a manager and a leader in business. And it was coaching where I learned a ton.
That's intriguing. All right, so let's talk a little bit about that.
Yep.
How do you feel how did you translate your skills from being successful in coaching to successfully building your agency and
Mhm.
successfully being an entrepreneur who's got a team relying on them for vision and mission and all that good stuff?
Yeah. So let me explain first what I mean
Mhm.
by I sucked. Okay. Because some of
Yeah.
y'all will hear this the rest of the story and say, oh, you couldn't have been that bad. I there was a point in time where I needed 6 people to fill positions.
Mhm.
And in a 1 year period, I hired 200 people to fill 6 positions.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Okay.
That's
I
impressive
sucked.
in not a good way.
Okay. So I'm
Okay.
telling you that I couldn't keep people around. People were quitting on me left and right. I couldn't, or I was hiring bad people and firing them. I sucked.
Okay.
Okay. So I want y'all to hear that. So no
Okay.
matter where you are today, you're not nearly as bad as I was.
Okay. That's inspirational. All right, so let's talk about
Okay.
that. How'd you start to climb out of that pit? What did you do?
So in 2001, I heard John Maxwell on an audio tape because it was tapes back then, y'all.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um,
Yeah, remember those,
I,
everybody?
yes, in a cassette tape in the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, right? And there was a statement that he made, lots of statements, but one that he stuck out to me. He said to me was, "You're not a real leader unless you can lead in in a nonprofit organization. If all you can do is lead when you're paying people, you're not a real leader. Real leaders can lead in volunteer situations."
Hmm.
And that struck me as like a ton of bricks because at that point I was failing as a leader in paid situations. And so that's what I started looking for, volunteer situations to learn how to lead, and really learn how to communicate, because that's what it really comes down to, is
This is
understanding how to
fascinating.
communicate.
Yeah, I mean, this is fascinating to me because I actually had a lot of volunteer leadership experience, which I developed alongside, the various stages of owning my own business. And
Hmm.
I guess I always knew to some degree intuitively that the more experience I had serving on boards or leading organizations that were nonprofit, as a volunteer, that some of that would rub off. But I never really looked at it that way. That if you can succeed at that, you can translate those skills into success in a
Yeah.
for-profit environment.
You see, because here's why. In order to get somebody to do something, you have to understand what motivates them.
Mhm.
You have to understand why they'll want to do it. And you have to be able to translate the thing that you want into what they want so that it can actually get done.
Yeah.
And when the only currency that you have is currency of, or else you won't get a paycheck,
Right.
then that's not real leadership.
Right. So, what did you do? What were the steps that you took to transition your mindset so that you could be more inspirational as a individual, as a human, to evolve into a leader that people who you paid wanted to follow?
Yeah. So one was a lot of personal development, but two was coaching in that. And so my coaching career also started around that same time in a very auspicious way. Um, in one of my first years, I coached my son, and dad coaching son, yeah, yeah, yeah. We love
Oh,
that.
yeah.
And I remember my son who was just turning 5,
Mhm.
and we were going into what should have been our second season, and we're sitting at the dining room table, and he says to me, "Dad, if that's the way you're going to coach, I never want to play again.
Oh, ouch.
And that floored me, y'all,
Yeah, that's a
because it's hard. And so imagine I have that, and I've got John Maxwell playing in my head at the same time, and I'm
right.
recognizing, crap, that's failure,
Mhm.
right? And when I stopped and listened to him, it was he hated the way I talked to him. He
Okay.
hated the way I communicated. And so I realized I wasn't listening to my players. I
Mhm.
also realized at that time I wasn't listening to my staff.
Mhm.
It was all about what I wanted. It was all about me,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
And that's the crucial hurdle that you have to get over as the boss,
Yeah.
is recognizes when you help them succeed, they will automatically help you succeed.
Yeah, and I think it's also about realizing and understanding that people do things for their own reasons, not
Mhm.
yours,
Yep.
which is such a challenging lesson to learn as an entrepreneur when you are putting your neck out there on the line financially and otherwise to make sure that they take home a paycheck, which feels sacrificial enough on some days, let's face it. But to realize that you are doing that plus they have entirely different motivations, wants, needs. Um, it's some tricky business on some days. You have to
Oh,
really
yes,
humbling, right?
it
And
is. It is. It is. And there was something that helped me though, Sharon, because right around that same time, right? So right around about 2004-ish, I found the E-Myth Revisited
mhm,
by Michael Gerber.
great book.
Yes. I listened to that book every year, at least once until 2021.
Mhm,
Every year.
yep,
Because what I heard in that book was okay, so I heard Maxwell. I heard my son saying I didn't know how to communicate. And then Gerber came in and said, the problem is your value structure.
mhm,
You don't understand the core values of your business, and you haven't set the core values of your business as a priority that you live through, that then your staff can buy into, and that you go look for people who match up on those core values. So
okay,
many of us look for somebody who can just do the job,
right. Or for
but
their
then they don't
technical
fit.
skills or technical
Yeah,
years of technical experience. So, how did you start? What were the early steps of actionalizing some of this personal development, which I think always precedes professional progress, right? Or
yeah,
business progress. What were some of the like concrete small steps you started to take in building
yeah.
your agency, translating some of these ideas into actual practice?
So I'm going to answer that by telling you a little bit of a story that's a parallel.
Mhm,
I was on a stage a couple months ago, and we were doing hot seats.
mhm,
We were doing hot seats with doctors, and this doctor came up because he had a hiring problem. And his hiring problem was he had hired and fired 37 front desk people in the last year, and front desk people are just idiots and they suck and they're stupid.
mhm.
That's
Sounds
what he
about
said.
right for a doctor.
That's what he said,
Yeah,
right? That those were his words,
yeah.
right? And but he needed a good front desk person. What was he going to do? So after flat out telling him he was the problem, right? I also gave him this advice, and this was the advice that I learned through trial and error that
Mhm,
worked fantastically.
okay.
You're going to screw up hiring. Understand that.
Mm,
You've got to spend the time of understanding and developing your values, and that just starts today by sitting and writing what are the things I believe I value that I hold near and dear.
mhm,
You're probably going to get it wrong, and that's okay, but you start and you write.
right.
Okay, whatever comes out you write and you hold that. Then you start hiring and looking for people who match those values. In that process you're going to hire people and they're going to be wrong and you're going to screw it up
Mhm,
and it's not going to work out. When it doesn't work out, Stop and ask, what was it that didn't work? Be
Mhm.
objective, remove the emotion, and look at, okay, well, they didn't value time. They were always late to meetings.
Right?
Oh, so you hated that. So now you're starting to uncover something that you actually value. And now you can go back and refine your list of values.
Mhm.
That process, that iterative process, helps you craft your values and continually refine who you're hiring.
Mhm.
Okay. You'll
Mhm.
eventually get to the place where, okay, yeah, my values are solid. And now it's just finding people who match those values.
And what I'm hearing too is don't be afraid of the trial and error that you're
No.
experiencing, because that can be exhausting because it's human to human contact, right? It's you're impacting not only yourself but the candidate's life by giving them a shot to work in your business, spending the time and money to onboard them, realizing hopefully quickly that it's not a fit, dismissing them before any more collateral damage. And then you got to quickly reassess, as you pointed out, what what value gaps were there? What was it about that didn't work out?
Yep.
And what's on me, and what was just bad
Yep.
luck? Um,
So, but let's talk about that for a moment because there are ways you can even shortcut in there. Okay.
yeah.
Most of us hire wrong, my
Mhm.
opinion. Okay.
Yeah.
Most of us, when you need to hire a position, you go out and you do a Google search for so and so job description, whatever the position is.
Yeah.
And you find a job description. If you're a little bit more savvy, you go to ChatGPT and say, hey, write me a job description for X position. And it writes you a job description. And then you go to a job board somewhere and post that.
Right.
And people apply. And then you try to do interviews with them. Yeah, wrong. Yeah, wrong. Okay.
Right.
Understand that the very first moment they encounter your job and your job post, they need to feel your values.
Mhm.
We even go as far as to spell out our values in job posts.
Yeah. I think that is an art in itself, is writing, painting the picture of this role and what you expect of the individual in it and how it fits into your company. It's an art. And even more so with all the technology tools that we have for screening resumes that
Mm-hmm,
come to us and
mm-hmm.
for putting them out there into the world for people to respond to, right? Putting the postings out there for people to respond to. So, inserting the humanity in there that incorporates your values, it's an art, I
It
think.
is. It is an art, and it takes a little time, but it's also scientific. It's an art and it's science, right?
Tell me more.
And so, for example, one of our values is curiosity is king. If you're not going to be curious, if you're not going to ask questions, if you're not going to continually work to ask better questions, I don't want you on our team.
Mhm.
So here's some of the things that we do. I give you a personality test, which is not like most of the other personality tests that you take out there.
Mhm.
And then you submit your personality test, and I send you deliberately to a website that doesn't give you a ton of information about the results of your personality test.
Okay.
Then we ask you a question about the results and how the results fit you. It requires you to go out and do research. Now, we see some people who don't do the research, and we
Mhm.
can tell. We see people who say, yeah, I went and I looked on this website to learn about this and this, and like, aha, somebody who understands being curious and going and find an answer,
Mhm.
right? And that's weeding.
Yeah.
It's a scientific way that we're weeding.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Likewise, um, we value the fact that you're going to uplift and empower others. Well, you can tell that in speech, how someone speaks.
Mhm.
Okay. So we ask candidates to submit a Loom video telling us about their friends and their favorite activities.
I like it.
If you can't talk about your friends and your favorite activities in an uplifting way,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that does say a lot about how you relate to people.
it does.
Yeah.
And so that's the next part. We rush too quickly to the interview. We actually, with candidates, have a minimum of 7 interactions back and forth by email or video before we invite them to an interview.
And then how many people talk to them before you talk to them and make the decision?
Well, technically, they at this point nobody talks to me anymore. Um,
Okay.
but I typically would have done the interviews in the past.
Mhm.
I do very few interviews anymore. And so we have teams that manage all of the communication back and forth. Sometimes someone may submit something and the team may come to me and say, hey, they submitted this. How do you feel about this answer that they gave? Right.
Yeah,
And then depending on where they work, so there'll be a hiring manager and their department head who then interviews them.
got it. So how many
Okay.
people on average, how big is your team, first of all?
23.
And how many people on average do they speak to before a decision is made one way or another?
So usually 3.
Okay. I mean, that's a good diverse representation of, right, the functions they're going to touch in the business once they,
Yep.
are offered a job there.
Yep. Yep.
So, when did you start to sense that this was having a positive impact on on you leading your staff? What was it? And was it any one seminal moment? Did you get a piece of feedback that helped you kind of feel like you cracked the code, or was it just a general, I don't know, more of a peacefulness that washed over you as a leader when you started to like more of what you saw in your team as a whole? How did you know when you started to turn the tide?
Yeah. So there are a couple moments there. Okay. There are a couple moments. So we've been hybrid and or virtual since 2010.
Mhm.
Okay.
Me
Um,
too. Me too.
Good.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. We've been international 100% since the pandemic.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, and one of the things that happened, so I've been in business since 1996. And the pandemic took us through an interesting time because I was tired coming into the pandemic and actually looking to get out.
Mm.
And so we were disbanding. And then the pandemic hit, and I was like, perfect. Um, and then I caught a wind, and that's a whole nother other story of how we came back and we retooled and so on and so forth in
Yeah.
2020, right? Um, but in that comeback, I started building solely international team. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, so there were a couple of moments. Moment number one happened 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago, where the world was just opening back up, and I went to my first event. And at that point, the team had lots of me because I was home all the time, and there was lots of me,
Right.
right? Every day
Always available. That's
you had
right.
lots of me,
Yeah.
and this was the first time I was going to be gone, and I was gone for a week. And I said, I'm not going to be checking in during this week. And I said, okay. In the beginning of the week, we had a meeting before I left and said, here are the things that need to get done this week. About, oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Went off, did vision planning for the next 3 years, and was all excited. Came back at the end of the week to meet with the team and came into that meeting. I was like, all right, so tell me what happened this week. Nothing. Everyone said, we were waiting on you. Now, at the time, we were a team of 6, but only 4 were really core people.
Okay.
Okay. And so I was talking to these 4 people, and nothing happened. Nothing had happened all week.
Hmm.
Nothing had happened all week.
Including the
I,
things you left with them to do?
nothing had happened all week.
Ooh, okay.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And if you're listening, you're probably going more than, whoo, you're pissed. I was hot.
Yeah.
I was livid.
Yeah.
I was livid. And I was livid because one of the things that I was laying out that week, outside of the obvious, was that I was going to be traveling more and I was going to be on more stages again. And so I wasn't going to be around. And I'm
Mhm.
sitting there and I'm hearing this and I'm saying to myself, how in the hell are we ever going to get there if they're not getting the stuff done?
Right.
Right?
Which is the number one fear, by the way, of every agency leader who doesn't want a hybrid or a virtual distributed
It
team.
is.
All right,
It
go on.
is. It is. And that's where I was. And I was sitting there boiling.
Mhm.
Okay. I was sitting there boiling, y'all. And so we got off, and I was in California at the time, and I had a long flight back. And on that long flight back, I thought about the E-Myth Revisited, and I thought about Maxwell, and I realized the problem was me. Now, you're going to say, how in the hell? No, it's not. It's them. It's all them. 3 years later, just over 3 years later,
Mhm.
three of those four people are still with me. The one who left, his aunt died, and he inherited a bunch of money, and he retired. Okay, great. Good for him.
Got it.
Three of them are still with me, and they are now running major departments of my organization.
Got it.
So they didn't change. Guess who changed?
You did, yeah. How?
Okay. And
How?
so what I developed out of that is something I call the case method. And it is the way that you're able to help your team grow, okay,
Mhm.
and take ownership of what they're doing and exist without you. So now, last year, I did 31 stages. I was on the road 31 times last year.
Wow.
Okay. I don't work when I travel. The only time I work when I travel is when I'm on a plane. Once I hit the ground, I don't work. I'm hardly ever home, and I don't work a lot. When I'm home, I'm doing this
Mhm.
on a camera, on a podcast or something, right? And
Right.
so I don't do a lot of work. I spend an hour and a half with each of my clients a month.
Mhm.
That's my work. The
Mhm.
team does everything.
How'd
The
you get
team
there?
does. And so what I had to learn was there's an art and a science to being able to teach them the things that I know. Because what they said to me that day when they said they didn't do anything was, we didn't know how to make decisions.
Mm.
That's what they were really saying.
This is so yes, this is such a resonant theme. It is you as the owner, entrepreneur, letting go of the control and trusting and believing that your team is going to do the right thing or that they're only going to ask the questions they absolutely need to ask to make the decisions so that they're not delegating back to you the things you're delegating to them. And it is hard for every single entrepreneur to do.
So it is. And I'm at a place now where I don't answer questions anymore
That's one way to do it.
because I've empowered them enough that they've got it. And
Mhm,
so when they ask a question, I often say, huh, how are you going to solve that?
mhm,
Right? And we have tools that we've given them to be able to help, right? So it's not just a uh, an absentee type of thing, right? But the point of the case method that I developed over these last 3 years was that number one, you've got something that you do that one, either you feel only you can do, two, you feel that nobody could do it as well as you can, or three, you flat out just don't trust anybody to do it.
right.
But it's the thing often that's holding you back.
Yep.
It is the bottleneck in the entire system. And if you're honest, you probably have five or six of them. Okay.
Absolutely. Guilty.
And and so what I've been able to do is recognize those and remove them from my life and give them to the team. Okay. So
Mhm,
a couple things here. And this piece is my philosophy. Number one, I hire for specific skills. So after I know you fit our culture, I hire you for your specific skill. I do not hire generalists.
Hmm.
Okay. So I know you can do this task well because we have an obsession with becoming world class at what we do, every single person.
Hmm.
Okay. So that's number one. Now, it can work if you hire generalists, but I'm just telling you that's not what I do,
Got it.
but it can work. Okay.
Got it.
What you do is you take that task that you think only you can do and you stop for a moment and you say, okay, when I do this task, here are the steps that I go through. Just think about it and write them down. As much detail as you can muster. Write out what you do. Then look at your team and make a decision. Who should be doing this task? Okay, Sally should be doing this task. Great. Go to Sally and say, Sally, I think you can do this task. I have written out how I do this task. I want you to go do this task using what I wrote out.
Hmm.
Now, let me be honest with you. Sally's going to fail.
Yep.
Okay. And you've got to know that going in. Don't tell her she's going to fail, but you got to know that she is.
Hmm.
And it's okay that she fails. And you've got to be okay with the fact that she's going to fail. This
Yeah,
is a
I'm glad you
process.
mentioned this because I was going to ask how you got the mindset of allowing the cushion, if you will, of allowing for failure or allowing for them modifying the way they get to the end goal, which might be different than the way you got there, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So I got the answer for all the, you got to, this does take self discipline.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me be honest.
Hmm.
But you've got to know that they're going to fail and be okay with it. Let Sally go do the task. When Sally's done the task, tell Sally, come back to me. Okay. Sally, come back. Okay. All right, Sally. So you've done it. Let's take a look at what you've done. Now,
Hmm.
you don't tell her, oh man, this is awful. You failed. You don't do that at all. Instead, you ask her four questions. Four.
Okay. Got it.
Question number one, and this, they spell CASE, the case method,
Hmm.
by the way. Question number one, what challenge did you have doing this project?
Got it.
Your role is to shut up and listen. Do
Hmm.
not say a word.
Hmm.
Just listen and take notes about whatever Sally says.
Got it.
Do not question. Do not, do not scowl. Nothing. This is
Hmm.
time to play poker, y'all. Just take in whatever Sally says. Resist the urge to say anything. Resist the urge to even agree.
Right. Don't raise an eyebrow, anybody. Don't raise it.
Nothing.
Got it.
That's question number one. Question number two is you're going to ask Sally to articulate, that's the A, articulate the steps that you went through. Now, you gave her steps, but you're not asking her to look at that. Asking her to articulate. Okay, so how did you do it? Tell me, what was the process you went through? How did you do this? She may need to screen share. She may need to show documents. You know, it might be like math class. She might need to show her work, whatever it takes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Let her articulate the steps. And once again, say nothing. Just take notes on her steps. Don't ask for clarity.
Got it.
Don't correct. Nothing.
Got
Just write the steps.
Got it.
That
So we've
those
got
two,
challenges and we've got articulate. Got it.
yes, those two are the hardest parts. Okay. But if you can get through those two, success and beauty is on the other side. Because question number three is we're going to study and dive deep. And so what you're going to do now is you're going to take a couple of the things that Sally did right, a couple of the steps that she did right. And you're going to take a couple of the steps that you can see she did not do right. Now, you're not doing all of them.
Hmm.
I really mean a couple, like two. Okay.
Right.
And you're going to study them and dive deep. You're going to ask her, well, what were you thinking about when you were going through this? Well, how did you process this? And why did you do it this way? Even on the stuff she did correctly.
Got it.
Okay. And let her tell you how she was thinking, because the thing that you are working to learn, and this is what where we started all the way back in the beginning, when I said the thing here is it's all about communication.
Hmm.
And what you're listening for is how her brain works so that you can figure out how better to communicate with her.
Mhm.
That's what you're listening for as you're studying and diving deep.
Got it.
Okay. And understanding where she was and what she was going through. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, in this, it's a bit of a back and forth. And this is where you still got to listen, but you can start to correct some on the stuff that she didn't do well. You can praise some on the things that she did do well. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So that's number three. Number four. And this was the one I found accidentally.
Hmm.
Y'all know when you get to like, you've had a tense conversation with someone and you get to
Yes.
the end of the meeting and you're like trying to ask the kind of question to get out. Right.
Yeah.
So the first time I did this, right? Yeah, she got it all wrong. It was awful. Absolutely awful. And understand, I've taught, except for Antarctica, I've taught SEO on every continent on this planet.
Mm.
Okay.
Mhm.
And I was teaching SEO. And so she got it way wrong. Right. I got 20 plus years of experience and she was brand new. Wait, I mean, it was awful, awful,
Got
awful,
it.
awful. Right.
Yeah.
And so trying to get out of the tenseness of the study and dive deep, I asked, so what was easier than you expected?
Mm. Love it.
And here
What a great
was,
way to end it on a lighter note. I love that.
and that's how it feels, right? But
Right.
here's what ended up happening in that one particular situation. She said that the first person I ever did this with, she said, "Oh, this part was so easy, and I had so much fun doing this part." And as she explained the part and she explained what she did, I realized she got lucky.
Oh,
She did it wrong and just got lucky.
oh boy.
And so sometimes you find those hidden gems in the what was easier than expected.
Right. Right.
But that's the case method. Now, once you do that and you've done it the first time, you take what you learn and you go back to that document that you wrote and you update that document because you realize stuff that was missing. Then you give
Right.
it back to Sally and let her do it again. And now you iterate through it,
Yeah.
iterate through it.
And you mentioned Loom earlier. I think uh, one other business coach that I spoke to in the past, actually in my, career of personal development, said use Loom to actually record yourself explaining how you do something you're doing while you're doing it. So you're not adding to your burden during the day by writing a set of policies or procedures or whatever. Just turn Loom on and say, "Hey, I'm doing this right now. I'm go here, I went there, I went," and build
Yes.
up your sort of your inventory of how you do it so that you've got that archive there and can just show it on repeat to people as they're learning.
Yes. And Loom works great for that type of stuff.
Mhm.
And for those of you listening who say, yeah, 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 but what I'm doing is intuitive,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, which means you're an artist, right? Because artists create intuitively.
Yes.
That's why I created this process too.
Yeah,
Okay.
I love it.
Because this helps you realize that what you think is intuitive actually is a system.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and also, intuition can be described in real time as well, and Loom is also great for that, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
you're
Absolutely. Without
think of it as a
question.
performance, if you will. If it's something that is your unique, secret sauce, you can
Yeah.
still, communicate it in a way that they can glean from you, kind of, where the gaps are that they might need to fill. I love this. This is such a articulate way of thinking about setting expectations, communicating feedback while
Mhm.
allowing the venue for them to communicate their learning and their feedback to you. Um, and also scalable for any size agency.
Yep.
And people who listen regularly know that I always love to call out things that help and scale at any size of an agency's, evolution. And this is something you can do if there's just two of you. If you've got one
Yep.
employee, you can do this. And so I love that. Talk a little bit about the mindset shift that
Mm,
you experienced as an agency leader while you were going through this? You had that moment 3 years ago.
mhm.
Nobody did. They waited for you to decide. How did you know when things started shifting and this is an evolution for all of us, right? We're never at the destination, it's a journey. But when did you start to sense that things were changing in a good
Yeah,
direction in terms of your
yeah,
leadership?
yeah. And so that's that's a great question. Um, so a few months after that situation 3 years ago, I started looking again at why am I doing this? Because honestly, I was making enough money and I
Mhm.
was fine. The team did not need to grow. Matter of fact, it could have shrunk and I'd have been fine. We were
Yeah,
making enough money for me to just live the life I wanted to live.
right.
And I was at a precipice of why continue?
Yeah.
Why continue? Why push? Why grow? Okay. I was at that crossroads. And here's what I had to recognize looking myself in my eyes. And so this is where it started because everything starts inside of you. Okay.
Mhm.
You want your team to grow and you want your team to change, it starts inside of you.
Right.
Okay. And here's what I recognized and what came to was I needed a bigger why for what I was doing. And my why became the fact that we were international, that I was hiring people from around the world, some, quite a few from third world countries who were just as smart
Mhm.
as people here in the United States,
Mhm.
sometimes smarter,
Mhm.
and they didn't have any opportunities. Okay. I
Wow.
remember one of those people that I told you in the core four,
Mhm.
one of them when she started with us, one of her kids wasn't living with her because her husband had died and she couldn't take care of the kids and they took one of her children,
Oh boy.
right? And through working with me, she got the kid back and moved into a new place.
Mm.
I
Yep.
also recognized somebody else on the team didn't have a working refrigerator. And I'm like, you're freaking smart. You're doing great work for me. What do you mean you don't have a working refrigerator?
Mm. Mm.
Right. And I was blown away. And so as I sat there and I was looking at myself, and this was early in 2022, I said, I'm going to commit to changing the lives of 100 families. We're going to change the generational wealth
Mm.
for 100 families.
Mhm.
And I went back to the team and I told them that. And I said, look, I see where you are. And I know where I've brought you guys from. Because all of you are making at least triple what you were making before, if not more than that.
Mhm.
Right. And so and I see how far that's brought you. And I'm not done. And we're going to affect the lives of 100 people. And this is the journey we're going on. This is what we're doing. This is the stake in the ground we're making. This is the change in what we're going to do. And so it became that it had to be bigger than me.
Yep.
And once it became bigger than me, and I took it back to them and I said, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm pushing. They got behind. They got behind. And so once they started to understand, again, what we said earlier about leading in volunteer organizations, when you lead in a volunteer organization, something has to get done, but you've got to motivate somebody and find their personal motivation to get on board, right? Outside of money. And
Yeah,
here
I
it was the
mean,
same thing. Go ahead.
I would that's an awesome story, and I think it to me, what it feels like is that you made a decision that your leadership was gonna be about service to the people following you instead
100%.
of the other way around, and once you made that transition as a leader, um, leadership clicked for you, which is an amazing
100%.
journey. And, for those of you who are multitasking while you're listening to this, just stop and think about that, about flipping the script and the dynamic. No matter where your people are, whether they're in the office or whether they're, at desks around the world, um, when you've articulated your mission well, and when you go through the personal metamorphosis as a leader of being about being a servant to the people who are following you versus the other way around, that's when they start to really want to kick it in gear for you. And I've seen this in action personally. My
Hmm?
path is different than your path, of course, but you know, for me, having to pull out of the business was not due to my speaking schedule, or it was personal circumstances in our family that required my attention. And my business coach at the time, you know, said to me, "Your people are looking for opportunities to step up for you. They want to serve you. You have to let them." Because I wasn't letting them. I wasn't I needed my hands in the things, right? I thought I needed to be involved in the things. I didn't need to
Hmm.
be involved in the things. And I, you know, I would just share one other personal thing, which is that when I stepped back and thought about it differently, because I didn't have a choice, um, my business grew significantly. I mean, multiple tens of percentages in a year's time in one example, and we're still growing at that clip year over year, and I think it's because I finally got that they just needed me to set the vision. They didn't need me to be in their business all day, every day. They
Exactly.
want to do their jobs. They do. They want
Ex exactly. It's so I just had this conversation earlier this morning with a young lady that I coach who runs an agency,
to. Mhm.
and we've been helping her grow really fast, right? And so we were talking some about exit strategy and that type of thing, and she's like, yeah, I do want to exit, and I don't want the business to be all about me, but honestly, I do want it to, because it's always been about me and it's me. The business is me, right? And I said, yeah, and that's also fundamentally the problem. So for some of you who are listening to this and you're having a hard time because we got a little mushy there, a little
Yeah.
sappy, right? And you're like, oh, this business. Okay, fine. Let me give it to you this way. Okay, let me say it in a completely different way here
Yeah.
for you. Understand that in order for you to achieve the things that you want to achieve with your business, the business has to become about the system that you've created and not
Absolutely.
about you personally.
Right.
Okay. The system is the thing that actually is what makes your business run.
Yes,
And
and
so,
yes, and if you wanna sell your business for a
exactly,
decent return on your investment,
it's
It
got
you
to
you
be.
you need to be able to get the hell out of the way. You just do, and you're not gonna get what you think your business is worth, your agency is worth.
No.
You don't get yourself out of the day to day. You just aren't.
Yes, you will never get that valuation, because the moment that you leave, everything will fall apart,
Right,
right? But the fact that for some of us who can say, "Hey, I can go away for a month and everything still runs," that changes your valuation because now they know it's not about you.
right,
Okay,
right.
and I get the ego, I do,
Yeah.
and you have ego tied up in it. But let me tell you something: that ego is also drowning you.
Mhm.
That dread that you feel right now, that weight that you feel, the anxiety that you feel is your ego stifling you.
So true. It's so true. I mean, it's true in all areas of your business why leadership is so fundamental. It's fundamental to your team, it's fundamental to the value of your business, and it's the very thing that's weighing you down. I couldn't agree more, Atiba. I really and I think that it's so good to have a peer deliver this message, someone who's been down this path and who's built the kind of business that
Yeah.
a lot of our listeners are striving to build too every day. So I'm so grateful to you for sharing some of your story and your journey as a leader
Oh,
of your
thank
agency.
you.
My pleasure. If agency leaders want to reach out to you or learn more about you or what Client Attraction Post does, what are some of the best places for them to get in touch?
The best thing to do is go to meetatiba.com. That's meet, ATI, B as in boy, A.com. That's going to take you directly to my LinkedIn.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Find me
Okay.
on LinkedIn, connect, send me a message. Let's talk human to human. I'm not going to give you no lead magnet. Come on, we know how that goes. Let's
Yeah.
talk like real people.
I love it. I love it. Atiba de Souza, Superman by day, leader by night or vice versa. I'm not sure which. I'm so appreciative of you sharing your time
Thank
today and
you.
your expertise. Thanks for your message and thanks for your stories. It's really been enlightening, and I know we're going to help a lot of agency owners as a result.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here and share.
It's my pleasure. Everyone, thanks for joining us today, and I'm looking forward to talking with you on the next episode. Until then, be well.